Good afternoon, everybody. I'll bring the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. First item on the agenda is our approval of the agenda. If there aren't any changes, we can move on. Does anybody want to make changes to the agenda? Okay, seeing none. Then we also have been given the October 12th draft meeting minutes of our last management committee meeting. Everyone's had a chance to look at those. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Lilligren, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Gonzalez. Any further discussion, edits, changes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no, and that passes unanimously. We'll now move on to our non-consent business reports of standing committees. And we've got item 2022-03. It's our non-represented plan changes, and we've got Marcy Syman, our Director of Human Resources, here to go over some of those changes with us.
Good afternoon, council members. So I'm here to represent to you the non-rep plan changes of business item 2022-302. So every year we come before this group and we make changes to the non-represented plan, and this is for our approximately 400 employees who are not under a collective bargaining agreement. And it covers clerical, administrative, technical, senior staff, managerial and executive classifications and regional administration. And that includes CD and MTS, Metro Transit and Environmental Services. So there are just a few changes in the plan for 2023. We've made a change to the probation section that really makes it clear that for current employees in a new position, when you don't pass probation, you may either your employment can be terminated. In the case of employees who are promoted, they could be put back into their previous position, and so that's how probation works in the organization and in this non-rep plan. Section 13 on discipline and dispute resolution. It really clarifies that and adjusts the requirements for the levels at which a written response is required. The current language had 3 different levels of written response. It still has 3 levels. The first level doesn't require a written response. And that it really clarifies that the section is referring to disputes that are disciplinary in nature. And then finally, significantly on the salary administration, it has the 2.5% general increase to the comp grid, and that those in steps would get a 1-step movement. Those in the performance range would get a 2.5% general increase, and that there would be 1.5% in the performance range. Is performance-based increases, so that the amount is based on the performance rate that employees get. So this salary administration change represents exactly what's happening with our other bargaining units. So it mirrors it, AFSCME, MANA, TMSA, and so on. The non-rep plan change also just includes an updated list of job classes in Appendix B, and then it just shows a grid in Appendix C, so how the compensation grid is moved up by 2.5%. And so this action supports the stewardship and prosperity thrive lenses in terms of falling within financial parameters for the council of managing our labor costs and the efficient and effective management of our financial resources, and it's fair and reasonable compensation that supports our employees. So with that, if there are any, I'll take any questions on this item.
Does the committee have any questions? Councilmember Lilligren.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Marcy. Just for my own edification here on the performance-based salary increases, and so what are the evaluation measures, or how are those performances evaluated?
Okay.
Please.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Chair and council members, so we have a performance management system. It's called Perform.
Okay.
And the employees have annual performance goals. And they also have competencies. So we've established a competency model for every level at the council. And employees in the non-rep plan are evaluated on their annual goals and their competencies. And it's performed by their supervisor, whoever they report to. Those performance reviews are all due on into the system completed by the 11th of December.
Okay.
So what happens is once we get the performance reviews in, then the Comp Labor Steering Committee will take a look at all of the reviews and how they shake out for all of the non-rep employees in the performance zone, and we ensure that we spend 1.5% of the salaries of people who are in the performance zone on the performance increases.
Okay.
So we basically see how the numbers shake out and then make sure that we spend that 1.5% on performance-based.
Okay, cool, thanks. And Madam Chair, so I think you just answered this as well. So the performance measures are established between the non-represented employee and the supervisor.
Correct.
Perfect, thank you. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions? Great. Seeing none, the proposed action is that the Metropolitan Council approves the non-represented plan changes effective December 24th, 2022, incorporating the revisions as explained in this meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Lilligren, is there a second? Second. Seconded by Barber. Any further discussions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed, no. And that passes unanimously. So thank you, Marcy. Appreciate that update and all the good information you provided us today.
Thanks.
All right, we are now moving on to our authorized list of financial institutions, 2022-291. We've got Mark Thompson, our Director of Treasury, with us. Hi, Mark.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. Mark Thompson, the Treasury Director. And I'm here to do a couple different items today. The first one is business item 2022-291. This is the 2023 authorized financial institutions list. We bring this forward annually. It's a list that includes the financial institutions that the council will be using in 2023 for credit cards, banking, and investment-related services. And it's been reviewed by the Investment Review Advisory Committee, and now we're bringing it forward to management and looking for council approval. Also in this business item, there's a chart of fees, and I'll walk through that in a moment, but that shows some of the fees associated with our financial services. Now, approval of this list serves a couple different purposes, as it provides awareness and transparency of the council's financial partners. Approval will also satisfy two state statutes that require the council to officially designate its depositories or its banks. And third, approval will satisfy a requirement in our investment policy that we obtain prior approval of all our banks and investment firms we use. So, quickly, the list has 7 different categories. You'll see it attached to this business item. The first is banking services, and that's just our depositories, our banks we use for our main banking partners. The credit card providers and processors are transit related, and as well as our purchasing card program and some of the debit card and recognition card programs we use. The custodial section covers the institutions that we use to safekeep our securities for our investment portfolios, as well as the firms we use for our hedging. We had to have a fuel hedging program, as well as some other escrows and trusts that we might need for bond refundings. The securities brokers are brokers we use to purchase securities for our short-term and long-term investment portfolios, which I'll be covering in a few minutes. The money market funds are our money market funds we can use to provide some liquidity in our investment activities. The next section is our OPEB trust. As you know, we have an OPEB trust that's managed at the state board and PERA administer and manage those funds for us at our direction. And the last category is certificate of deposit program. This is a list of the banks that are currently approved in our program. There are only really 2 changes from last year. Otherwise, it's the same list. You'll notice 2 items are asterisked on there. One in the custodial section, Wells Fargo, who was our former provider, sold that business to Principal, so we're now using Principal. And then in the money market section, Wells Fargo also sold off their asset management division, which included some money market funds that we use for investing, and those were rebranded as Allspring, so you'll see Allspring listed there. So we're currently using, it's essentially the same funds, but they just rebranded. And they're used in conjunction with Principal in our custodial account. So the institutions, all these institutions on the list have already gone through any required procurement process. So this is, and we can also make changes to this list at any time. You know, for instance, we're soliciting new banks for our CD program. And if we were to make a new CD investment, we'd bring this item back and add the bank, such as, you know, we're talking to First Interstate Bank, the Black-owned bank in our community, as well as Sunrise Bank, Alliance Bank. There's a number of banks we're reaching out to try to expand our CD program. And if we end up looking for agreeing to do an investment with one of those banks, we will come back and add those to this list. Also touch on that chart. There's a chart on the last page of this business item which gives us some idea of what the fees are for these services. You know, the general banking fees are showing at $120,000. That's a slight increase from the year before. It was $93,000 last year. So we pay about $10,000 a month for our general banking service fees. I will say that we typically offset those with earnings credits on our deposits, so we're not actually paying out those funds, but generally that's what the charges are, is about $10,000 a month. The merchant banking fees are the credit card processing fees. These, of course, are, a lot of these are, well, all the numbers you're seeing on that chart are transit related. So, it depends on ridership. The 22 credit card fees are near $541,000 compared to $439 last year, so they went up about $100,000, but it's really related to our ridership as far as how many fees we pay on those. The purchasing cards, we've seen our spend on our purchasing cards, go down the last 2 or 3 years, but 2021 and 2022 are pretty stable. That's a no-cost program. We actually get a rebate depending on our spend, so we're expecting to give you $100,000 back on that. The custody fees, like I said, are for our investment securities. That's approximately $40,000 a year. Slight increase in 22 from 21 of about $8,000, so not a large amount, but it was an increase. I would expect it to stay at 40,000 in 23 also. And the last are 2 smaller items, the trustee services and escrow services. Those are really small items that are not any change. I think they went up $1,000 each. And in the escrow services, we only use if we do a bond refunding, so those are the items that may or may not happen. So for the Thrive lens on this item, competitive solicitation of financial services demonstrates stewardship over the council's investment portfolios, banking activities, credit card transactions, and other financial activities by ensuring the needed services are obtained at the best possible pricing according to procurement policies. And Madam Chair, the proposed action is that the council approve the 2023 authorized financial institutions list.
All right.
Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any questions? Councilmember
Yeah,
Lindbergh.
Madam Chair, thanks, Mr. Thompson. Mark, I wonder if you could please just say a little more about the efforts to identify new banks for the CD program and especially around black-owned banks or community-level banks. And I feel like we had this conversation last year as well, that a small portion of our overall banking can mean a lot to a small bank like that without really incurring a lot of risk for the organization and maybe a little bit more additional administrative work. And it just seems like these kinds of efforts are such a priority with this council. And so I'm just wondering if you could say a little more about our efforts.
Sure, Madam Chair, committee members. Now, the CD program is one thing.
Sure.
Banking services are another.
Sure.
So yes, we are reaching out to a number of different banks, including First Interstate, I think you're referring to, and trying to get them interested and get them to pull the trigger. That particular one isn't progressing very fast. They certainly are doing things in the community that align with our goals of our program. They're really reaching out. I met with them. They're really reaching out, trying to serve the unbanked and the minority communities, and they're concentrating on mortgage, trying to get mortgages for minorities. So they're doing good things. I don't have a reason why they're not responding, but we're trying to get them to pull the trigger. Leaving messages, calling them. I met with them once, and they seemed very enthusiastic about it. And so that's kind of the CD program. I've also met with other banks, Alliance Bank, Aspire Credit Union, some other ones, Sunrise Bank. It's interesting that as I talk to these banks, they know who the good banks are, who the banks are out in the community that are doing the right things, that align with our program. Me as a person sitting in the council, it's hard to find the right ones, and that's what we want to get to, is the right ones. And so I'm getting referrals from one bank to another, which is great. So it's been a little bit of a struggle to get things to happen, but we're working on it.
Great, thanks, I appreciate it. Madam Chairman, I guess I shouldn't have framed my question just within the CD program. I just think overall within banking, I don't know, I don't know what the total amount of banking we do, but I know during my time at the city of Minneapolis, after a long discussion, we shifted a very, very small percentage of the city's overall banking needs and financial institution needs to a black-owned, smaller, wasn't a bank, it was a financial firm, that had a huge impact on that going concern, and really didn't, again, accrue any risk to the city or really matter to our large corporate bank that handled most of the city's financing. So I'm just putting that out there, that's a conversation that I think is worth having, and it's a way of using the largesse of the council to really kind of spread it around, spread the benefits around.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I can respond to that. I kind of talked about the CD program. The banking's different, right? So we have a lot of different banking services we use with, Wells Fargo is our current main bank.
So is the city of Minneapolis.
Yeah. So it's a balance between efficiencies. It's not always easy, or wouldn't be easy for us to have a large number of banks and moving lots of money around. And small banks sometimes can't capitalize on our large $50 million deposits in and out every day and things like that. So it's a little more difficult. I'll just mention that we are going out to RFP our banking services next year. And I'll be bringing more information to this committee in November 30th to talk about the solicitation. So it's not easy to carve out pieces of our banking services and still maintain our. The more you're moving money around, the more fraud issues you have, the more risk you have, the more inefficiencies you have in reconciling, and it goes on and on. But I hear what you're saying. That we're going to be soliciting our main bank, which we need to handle our. But that's not going to preclude us from looking for off things to small banks in the future too.
I look forward to seeing them.
I'll come back to that as well, Councilmember Pacheco.
Yeah, Madam Chair, and members of the committee, if we had this discussion at the investment review committee
Yep.
just yesterday. And it is, you know, I think you have to be really creative in this, and it's a difficult one, especially when you deal with the amount of dollars we are. But I've been through this at Procurement, at both Excel and US Bank. At Excel, we moved just the smaller part of what we had, and they manage a lot of cash as well, but we moved just their foundation, their philanthropic giving, to the smaller Northeast Bank from US Bank, which actually Richard Davis at the time was the chair of Excel, but he was now their lead director. But we were able to carve that out, like you said, and similarly, I think we should. And over at, I think it was US Bank, we've done a similar kind of thing where we were able to put some, maybe more difficult here. But it goes back to when we were looking at transportation and the funding of major projects there, and the Department of Transportation using those ADA cutouts on the corner to bundle, you know, so many concrete jobs or projects that can be done, and at the same time work with these smaller, there's Cruise Concrete and a few others that help them understand the bonding capacity issues and the safety issues and all of that. And so the question is, when we do go out for our main banks and our bigger banks and the services, is there may be a time where you give a few extra points or whatever based on them getting the business that we have to be creative and look at tools that they have that we are unaware of, or maybe they can help us even be creative on it. And I think that's when we deal with these kind of sizes, I think that's always a good way to look at it, because I think we benefit the banks, we benefit the community, and I think they're just as eager to do something as well. But like us, on a lot of things, they're held to a certain level of regulations and efficiencies that they have to achieve. But we've been following it on the investment committee as well, and so I'll just let you know that.
Thank you, Councilmember Pacheco. I appreciate that, having that body looking at all of this as well and having you be a liaison back to us. That's awesome. I will just follow up too. I was reading a newsletter that came out this week, and I think the term was working on our inclusion muscle memory. So I challenge you to work on your inclusion muscle memory. It's going to feel awkward and horrible. We all know that, but we have to. This is our last year on. Maybe I'll get reappointed, but we've been talking about this now for 4 years. So you've done some really good work. You've made some strides, but I would encourage you not only to be creative, which is important, but to be tenacious and really get there with this group, because we are challenging you to do it. And I've been in sales. Getting the deal done is hard, but we really prioritize that for you, and in any way that you can do that. As we are looking out into 2023, I know this group would be very grateful for that. It's been part of our overall goals of the council, which you know, so we really applaud your work, but push hard. I encourage you to push hard, because we want to make changes.
Will do.
Okay.
Well, I think this, Madam Chair, the CD program has been expanded. It's gone from 0 to 9 million, now it's up to 18.5 million. We've got approval for 20 to 25 million. So we've got room for 2 or 3 more CDs depending on the size. And I'm confident we'll get those done.
Good.
In short order, hopefully.
That'd be great, because we want you to get that done. That'd be great. Okay, just one other question too on the chart. On the right-hand side, I know you were going over kind of where we at and where we're gonna be. Is it estimated 2021 expenses that the chart notes, or are we talking estimated? This is a 2022 report. Are we talking about where we're ending this year for estimated 2022? Or are you looking prospectively? I'm just trying to follow where we're at.
The numbers are 2022 estimated numbers.
Okay.
We're not done with the year yet, but it's 2022.
Yeah, so there's just a typo on the chart. I just want to make sure I understood it. I'm just tracking with the numbers.
I thought we switched that. I know there was a typo.
No, that's okay. I just trying to get my head where what reference point we're talking about. So that's fine. 2022. Any other discussion? Councilmember Lee.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Mark. This might be a dumb question, but PayPal is listed under card providers. And does that mean we sell transit inventory or buy via eBay? Is that what that means?
You know, I'm not sure what that means. That's a transit item. I'd have to double check exactly what they're doing on eBay. Let me just read it. I'll have to look that up, Councilman.
That's right.
Yeah, if you could just circle back and email us the answer to that question, that'd be great. Anything else from the committee on this item? Okay, back to, so the proposed action is the Metropolitan Council approved the 2023 Authorized Financial Institutions list with the go forth and get small business minority owned interest banks for next year. Any other further is there a motion?
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Pacheco, seconded by Lee. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. And that passes unanimously. So thanks, Mark, really appreciate it, all your hard work. We're now moving on to the information portion of our agenda. Again, we've got Mark here to talk about our quarterly investment review and presentation for us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, this is a quarterly investment update I give to this committee. We met yesterday in the Investment Review Advisory Committee and discussed this information also. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the economy quickly and interest rates, and then we'll go over the performance and the holdings of our investments. This is, like I said, as of the end of the third quarter, and I guess I'm running this, right? I think. There we go. Oops. Try that one more time. There we go. So as we all know, inflation is one of the main stories in the economy right now. It continues to surprise to the upside. This chart shows the CPI for the Consumer Price Index, which is a common measure of inflation for the last 2 years, and you can see that July was 8.5%, August is 8.3%, September was 8.2%. The Fed, as we know, continues to raise interest rates to try to fight this record inflation, and they want to see a 2% number. They're increasing rates at a very fast pace, as you probably hear in the news, and I'll show you a little bit more in a moment about the moves they've been doing. The red line shows inflation without food and energy, which are two volatile components of inflations, and that's hitting record levels also. We've got October's CPI number coming out tomorrow. That expected to be near 8% again, so it's not going away, and the Fed's going to keep raising interest rates. This slide, a little deeper dive into inflation. This is showing the components of inflation on a monthly basis, and you can see the far right side shows the third quarter. Kind of some notes on that you can see the red bars that are below zero, so that was energy, and that was, if you remember, there was a dip in energy prices and gasoline prices during the quarter. The blue, kind of the lighter blue, and the gold is services and food, which saw price increases during the quarter. The dark blue, which kind of disappears, was goods. It was kind of an interesting shift during the third quarter where consumer spending really went away from goods and more towards services as people start going to restaurants and hotels and traveling. And services also includes things like medical care and housing, rent, things like that. So kind of an interesting shift away from goods, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So the near-term outlook for this is still that we're going to see our energy prices bump back up as we head into winter. So we kind of think those negative energy numbers will disappear. The prices of services will continue to be high. So we don't expect inflation's going anywhere soon. The labor market, this is a quick graph of the total jobs before the pandemic and through the pandemic. You can see we've recovered the total number of jobs that we had before the pandemic. Started at 152 million back in the first quarter of 2020. course, the big dive with the onset of the pandemic, and then we've been coming back, and this chart goes through August of ’22. So we've actually got a little bit more data that's come in, and we're now at 153 million jobs, 153.3 million jobs. So labor market's still very tight. There's still, even with these numbers, there's still 10 million job openings around the country. You know, we've seen that here as we try to hire people. It's still very high, still very tight labor market. Labor costs are still high. It's still difficult to find workers, you know, in many sectors. But I'll show you in a minute, there might be some signs that it's slowing a little bit. This is a graph showing Minnesota job growth. Maybe you've seen this or heard some things about Minnesota job. Minnesota's job market is proving to be one of the tightest markets in the country. You can see the dark blue line where this is showing our jobs too. It's pretty much recovered from the back to the pre-pandemic levels. The one interesting statistic is that there's 4 job vacancies for every unemployed job seeker in Minnesota, which makes it a very tight market. In the second quarter, I don't have the third quarter statistics, but we had 62,000 people looking for jobs, and there was 230,000 job openings, so it was very tight. So you might have also heard that Minnesota had the lowest employment record of any state ever in June and July at 1.8%. So I mentioned that job growth might be slowing. You know, it's still very, very strong, and it's something the Fed really focuses on is how tight the job market is. And until it loosens up, they're going to keep raising rates. So this is showing jobs added monthly to the economy. 261,000 jobs we added in September, which was still strong, well above expectations. But if you look at the dotted line, you can see that it's coming down. That's a 12-month average of job growth in the economy. So maybe there's some signs that it's going to keep slowing down. You know, in 2021, we averaged 561,000 jobs a month added, and now we're down about 450,000. So it has slowed down. And you've probably heard there's a number of layoff announcements lately. I think Meta announced today they're laying off 11,000 people. So maybe there's some cracks in the labor market. The unemployment rate is still very, very low. It was at 3.5, now it's at 3.7, so it's ticked up a tiny bit. It's still very, very low. Wage growth is just under 5% a year. So it's still, labor costs are still going up. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about GDP and economic growth. You know, we had 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth in the first and second quarter. The third, we got positive, so it went up 2.6% in the third quarter. This chart shows the dark black line, I guess, is showing the level, but the boxes show the components of it, and you can see it's you know, we saw a really strong, I should say, on the negative side in the third quarter. You can see inventories were negative as well as residential investment. So you know, obviously the housing market's been hit really hard with rising interest rates and mortgage rates. I think the drop in mortgage rates was the highest ever, and you know, contributing to growth, we have consumption is still strong. That's the dark blue on the top, and then business investment has picked up a little bit, and our net exports were a big component of growth, mainly because you know, as I mentioned, that consumers are moving away from goods. So there's been retailers are reducing inventories; they're not importing as much, and so our net exports are really high.
And I don't mean to cut you off, I'm just watching time and the
There
other
you go.
items that we've got on here, so
Okay.
don't wanna take anything away from this presentation, but I know that we've got two other items of information, and I know they both wanna meet, get in front of us, and then also our closed meeting session, so.
Well, I can skip ahead if you'd like, Madam Chair.
I think so for now, and
So
then
we've
of
got
course,
about-
if anybody on the committee has questions, you've got all the data, you can circle back after the meeting as well.
Okay.
So sorry about that, Mark.
No, it's good. I was just gonna talk a little about interest rates. You've seen this before in the stock market, and then I was gonna I'll jump ahead to the actual portfolios quickly. You know, the short-term portfolio is something we use for cash flow, and it's really short. It's invested 1 year and less, and it's done very well actually because of the rise in interest rates. You can see our allocation has changed a little bit, but that's just searching for yield amongst very short-term securities, so we're buying more discount notes and less T-bills. On the right, our total return was right on our benchmark. You know, but the good thing is our average yield is doubling. You can see that in the second bullet. Up to 2.49, you know, where a few months ago we were buying short-term securities at 0.5%, now we're buying them over 4%. So it's a big increase to our earnings. You can see that the interest income in the third quarter was 4.1 million versus 1.5 in the second. So the Fed increasing short-term rates is great for that portfolio. Now, increasing interest rates aren't so great for the long-term portfolio. So I gotta catch up here. You know, that's a portfolio that's our longer-term reserves, and as interest rates rise, the market value of those securities goes down. So we had the third quarter in a row of negative returns, our fourth, and that it's painful to watch, but it's on paper only. So we're not selling these securities and realizing these losses. Our interest income from the securities we hold is staying steady. We will get, the good news is as maturities happen, we get to roll it off and purchase it, much higher into the new higher interest rate environment. So we just need to get through this interest rate cycle and stop seeing these negative numbers. We did outperform our benchmark, just because we have a much shorter duration, so we're not quite as sensitive to the interest rate moves. But no real change in strategy for either of these portfolios going forward. Do I have a couple more minutes, or am I?
1 minute.
Okay. Sorry, I did.
I'm sorry too, I just
No,
gotta make sure we get everybody else.
I'm happy to talk to anybody after or offline, but so the OPEB trust, as you know, is management at the state board, and we dictate the allocation amongst 3 different buckets: an equity bucket, a fixed income bucket, and a cash bucket. And we saw a negative return again in the third quarter. We had negative return in both the equity portion and the fixed income portion. We also made a withdrawal, so a lot of that drop in value is a withdrawal we made to pay for our annual OPEB expenses. And we did reduce our equity exposure by moving 20 million out of the equity bucket. Even after these market downturns, our liabilities are still fully funded, which means greater than 100%. So that's good news. Our allocation method is working. We had great returns for 10 years where we were getting 15, 16, 20% returns, and that has put us in a great position, able to withstand these downturns. But am I done, or do I have?
I think that's it.
Okay.
And I do say that with deep gratitude. And again, it's great.
Tried to
This
get it
goes
in.
to the investment review committee and, but again,
Yes.
thanks for your offer to go deeper with all of us, but the transparency and the expertise you bring to this is great, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Any final, one, yeah,
Just a thought out
Yes.
on this here.
Yeah.
But this is the second time we've had to short change a presentation till the next meeting, because either, can we back up meetings up till 2 o'clock because I hate to have people prepare and then have to dash out because we have to do our agenda along.
yeah, I'll work with George on our agenda planning, and I know, we've just got regular items that are coming before us, and we wanna get to this litigation review, and then of course we've got climate action that we wanna have come before us too. So we will thank you for that suggestion, we'll be very mindful of that. All right, so I'll bring up now, we've got Jody and Ashanti here, Procurement Office of Equity, Procurement and Office of Equity and Equity and Equal Opportunity, boy, that's a mouthful, sorry about that. And we'll get a review, quarterly review on their work, so welcome, thank you.
Thank you. Lori, is the power?
It will.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Jody Jacoby. I'm the Director of the Procurement Department. And I'm here today with my partner, Ashanti Payne, Assistant Director in the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity. The Council Expenditures Policy of Goods and Services authorized the Regional Administrator to approve awards not exceeding $500,000 for the purchase of goods and services, and construction awards not exceeding $10 million. And as you'll remember, we recently increased that policy for construction with your help. And the initial feedback, not only from the procurement staff, but from the business units and the vendor community, has been very positive and greatly appreciated. So today's report includes a breakdown that's grouped by value and procurement type. It also includes MCUB utilization. So after I review the procurement summary for Q3, I'll transition to Ashanti to talk about the MCUB utilization. So we'll move, no, that's okay, we have this. We'll move to the second page to just look at the high-level summary, the at a glance for the Q3. And the bottom pie chart on the left shows very typical that 95% of the procurement transactions are of value less than $10,000. And then the pie chart on the right illustrates that 93% of the procurements by contract value are greater than $175,000. And those are the projects that you see in this report. And that threshold is important because that's the value where we publicly advertise projects. Zipping back to the procurements by transaction value, that 95%, there were 9,000 for this quarter alone, 9,693 separate procurement events alone. And those range from purchasing card transactions to purchase orders to major construction. That is a lot of work, but that value is pretty typical on a quarter by quarter basis. And compared to last quarter, it was about 100 more transactions. What's also unique is the value, the total value for Q3. And even though there were only 100 more transactions, we saw a difference in contract value of an increase of 300 million. So we had a lot of big contracts this quarter. I wanted just to talk, I know we don't have much time, but really talk about some of the smaller dollar transactions, less than 175, that a lot of the purchasing team, we have 12 really tenacious, to use your word, Chair Johnson, tenacious purchasing agents that have really been in the rigor to ensure that we have equitable contract awards. And looking at some statistics going back to when we increased the MCUB micro purchase level up to 125,000, I'll just go through each year and a percentage of the orders that were to MCUB recipients. So in 2019, it was about 3 to 4% of purchase orders awarded to MCUB. In 2020, that increased to 8%. And in 2021, it was 12%. And this year, we're trending consistently 15 to 17%. Right? It's really good work. It's a lot of rigor. It's a lot of courageous conversations and tenacious actions that are causing behavior changes. and adapting and learning and growing. And so I just wanted to illustrate, even though that isn't included in this report, just a lot of great work done by staff. And additionally, this quarter alone, 7 emergency declarations to MCUBs, 18 state contracts, and 28 sole sources. In looking at the contracts that are represented on this report, pages 3 to 11, just pointing out that there were 6 contracts specifically that had 100% commitment by an MCUB or a DBE supplier. That's really significant. And if you look at each of the contracts, you'll see that the goal set and the final commitment was much higher in every single contract. And if you look at that delta between the goal and the commitment, that represents the council spending an additional value of $4,600,472.36 with DBEs or MCUB.
Just the delta.
Just the delta.
Got it.
Well done.
So again, because of respect of time, be happy to answer questions, or I can transition to Ashanti to talk about the utilization this quarter, again, with 175,000 or higher.
Okay, any questions? Ashanti, the floor is yours.
Oh yeah, take it away.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. Ashanti Payne, Assistant Director in the Office of Equity and Equal Opportunity. And I'm here to talk about our MCUB participation for Q3 2022. We did not achieve our goals for constructions or goods and services and payments received by MCUB firms in Q3. Goods and services has been increasing from where it hovered last year, around 3%, and now is consistently around 4.5% for 2022. We had a 20.1% increase in total payments made to MCUBs in Q3 versus Q3 last year. That's resulted in $522,000 more payments to MCUB firms. Regional administration is the only division that met or exceeded their MCUB goal for goods and services, and they achieved 13.9% of a 10% goal. We continue to see distribution of payments to MCUB firms across all racial categories versus last year. However, it is dominated by Black-owned firms and white women-owned firms. Black-owned firms payments just under $1 million, and white women-owned firms at $1.5 million. The next closest would be Asian Pacific Islanders at $307,000. Some of the highlights for Q3, Jody mentioned, state contract use, emergency declaration use, and sole source to MCUBs. That is very important to point out because traditionally those areas have been identified as not having opportunities for MCUBs. So that's proven not to be true. We're able to achieve participation through MCUBs through those contracting methods. Also, we conducted an info session for an upcoming RFP that's actually out now for our IS services, and 39 MCUBs attended the event. I just talked to our specialists assigned to that project. We did not assign a goal, but IS is committed to 25% as a floor in terms of MCUB. There were 120 people that attended the pre-proposal meeting today, and I think that's definitely a testament to the outreach that we did. We don't get that kind of participation on large capital projects, and I think we were able to connect with communities, specifically businesses owned by Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, and Asian-owned businesses. We also cemented and now have seen payments and activity on our supplier diversity effort through New Flyer and B&L Supply. B&L started supplying New Flyer components in September, and last year in Q3, spend with B&L was $572. This year in Q3, B&L spend was $26,476. So those type of efforts, I think are a result of efforts of staff, hard work, outreach, and I think we are definitely making strides. I'm hearing in the industry and in the communities, folks are talking about what is happening at Met Council and the different things that we're doing, and that is good to hear and to receive that feedback. So I think that's important to share with this council as well. And I will stand for any questions.
Any questions? Just say great work.
Great.
I mean, really, from where we've started again with this council and this group to where we are today and where we're going, there's momentum, I can tell, behind all of this as well. So appreciate your hard work. Keep going.
I'm sure, yeah, thanks, just add my thanks and, great work. It really is exciting to see this progress. And Ashanti, I really wanna thank you for sharing to sort of the anecdotal, what you're hearing in the community. That matters, right? I mean, numbers are important, but reputation is huge, so thanks, excellent.
Great, thank you very much. Next up, we have Director Lisa Barajas from, Community Development, but also our council member, oh my gosh, I'm losing it. Sorry, Lindstrom.
I've been called Lindstrom before.
I know, I did not sleep much last night, I apologize. Yeah, right, and they are here to talk to us about the Climate Action Work Plan strategies discussion, so I'll turn it over to both of you, and thanks for being here today, we appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and if we run long, then just kick in that Academy Award music,
We'll play you off.
plays us off. This is the fourth committee that we've been to, including Community Development,
Yes.
on Monday night, where Chair Johnson? Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what it is, Chair Johnson. Brought up some excellent points about bringing forward this community action plan, a climate action plan, to the management committee and how it's going to be manifest through the budget. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking clearly there's going to be some budget impacts, some cost impacts. Then I was thinking there's costs to not taking action. And in my own district, District 10, where I represent Shoreview, they have Vadnais Snail Lake Regional Park. Vadnais Snail Lake Regional Park is underwater. A good chunk of it is underwater for much of the year. And the city of Vadnais Heights actually had to raise up a road because of the water that this park is getting. They had to raise up a road, think about the cost of that. Ramsey County, it's a Ramsey County park, so they have park shelters that are underwater. They have paved trails that are underwater, so there's a huge cost of that. And last but not least, we have an interceptor, sewer interceptor, that is, you guessed it, underwater. And how do you maintain a sewer interceptor when it's underwater? You can't. So we are, next spring, moving that interceptor to higher ground. So there's a huge cost to our ratepayers as well. That's just one example. The other example that I can think of is when I started on the council, 2019, one of the first things that faced us in environmental services was the Mississippi River flooding. You think all of our wastewater plants are on rivers. So we had the Metro plant was facing the Mississippi, the 8th largest flood in 2019. When that happens, we have to hire an emergency contractor to build a temporary levee. Think about the cost of that. We put a road on top of that levee so that we can access the plant. And then the way that the plant works with the effluent coming in here and then flows into the Mississippi River here. Well, that works great 99% of the time, except when the Mississippi River is up here. And that means we need to pump all of that effluent 24/7 for weeks on a time to get it from here up into the river. And there's a huge cost to that, running these pumps, the electrical demand that takes. And then we also have to hire 24/7 electricians to make sure that those pumps are working. Because really bad things happen when those pumps stop working and the effluent starts going the opposite way. So there's a cost to not doing action, and then there are significant savings that for taking action. I'll just give a real quick example on that. Our community solar garden subscriptions, where we're saving, just in environmental services, we're saving around $8 million over 25 years. And here's something innovative that we're doing. Seneca, wastewater treatment plant, in Councilmember Barber's district, I do believe, in that general, okay, in the general area. In that general area, it has a closed landfill on it. That's where we dump the ash from the wastewater treatment plant for about a decade, in the 70s and 80s. Closed off the landfill. Well, we're never gonna build any sort of anything on top of a closed landfill. It can't be used for anything except solar panels. Solar panels on the buffer land, on this closed landfill at the wastewater treatment plant. Solar panels don't care if it's a little smelly from time to time. You can use ballast so that they don't penetrate the landfill, and we're saving, again, $8 million over 25 years just at environmental services. That's some creative thinking that I think this climate action plan is just gonna further encourage. And with that, I'll turn it over to
And that's
Lisa.
it's a Blue Lake, and it's the land between the wastewater treatment plant and Valley Fair, so nothing would have ever been there. So,
Exactly.
perfect test.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. I'm happy to be here today, and I will move quickly because I know we have a number of items before our council meeting begins at 4. So just as a reminder of where we are and what the purpose of the Climate Action Work Plan is. I mean, you've heard me say this, but this really builds on our existing climate work, as Councilmember Lindstrom was saying, work that we have been doing over the last 15, 20 years at the council in our pockets and in our divisions, but really working toward, in this Climate Action Work Plan, a more unified approach across our divisions for accelerating our work and learning from one another across our divisions' work and how we manage billings, manage our energy efficiency, and manage the climate risks that we're already experiencing today. This also builds off of our commitments in Thrive MSP 2040 to learn and grow and become a leader in the space, especially in the leading by example portion. Again, just examples on our past and current climate work that should all be very familiar with for you. We are in the 4th quarter portion of this plan right now, moving towards adoption, slated for December, if we stay on track here. But I just want to make a remark about how significant, it's been my privilege to be able to present the work that our cross-divisional team has been doing over the last 3 years in developing this plan. And there are probably 40 plus staff from across every single division of the council that are core to this work, as well as dozens of other staff who have been engaged as part of this project. Because in every little way, most staff across the council touch energy efficiency or risk or climate, an emergency preparedness and operations is just a regular part of their everyday work. So it's really important that we are really organizing ourselves around that and understanding and building our capacity, which is some of the actions I'll talk about today. So our basics, as we talked about previously, were organized by commitments with 5 main commitments, and then strategies that support those, and then more than 60 actions to implement those strategies that we have put within this climate action plan. And so in a 5-year time frame, with the intent of doing annual updates and progress reports to the council on what's working and what's not working, what should we be doing better, and what successes are we seeing. We also see this as an opportunity to build our future work beyond 2027, and also to integrate into our regional planning efforts as we move into that more broadly and external to our work here at the council. So just a reminder about the 5 commitments I discussed in more depth at our October Metropolitan Council meeting, but today I really want to focus on those actions. There was a short strategy matrix, and while there's 60 overall, or 60 plus within that matrix, today's agenda posted, I think, just a little fewer than a dozen that are really focused on those that are cross-divisional or are listed as all under that lead column there that I've highlighted. In other committees that we were at earlier this week and previously, we focused on those that are focused on CD, for example, at Community Development Committee, yesterday at Environment Committee with ES-focused actions. And so today really focusing on those council-wide and cross-divisional actions. So under that first priority, to jump right into it, the priorities are organized by being or defined as being high impact and low difficulty as priority ones, the ones that are gonna get the most bang for their buck, if you will. That doesn't mean it's the timeline that we're gonna move within. Sometimes that timeline will start in year 2 or year 3 or take an extended period of time to get completed. But these are the ones that we find to fall within priority 1 council-wide. These are really, all of these actions fall within our environmental justice commitment. So each of these actions are really related to ensuring that we're applying an environmental justice framework to all of our work, both the actions that we flagged within the matrix itself across the entire matrix, but that we're also engaging in regional partnerships that consider all of the impacts to historically marginalized and underrepresented communities in the region. And that we're not just doing that when we're required to do that from federal requirements, but that we're doing that as part of all of our work and going above and beyond as well, and really building some ownership into the process for all of those that we're engaging. Further, including that same sort of lens within all of the tools that we create, we provide a lot of technical assistance, but we don't often include the people impact as part of that. And that's what that action really speaks to. We are very good about talking about the built environment, how much flow we put through something, how many cars move through a certain area, but we don't often bring in our very vast and deep understanding of equity considerations, for which we have a very large data set. So that's an action we wanted to explicitly commit to within this plan as well. In addition to really recognizing not just what we know from our engineering textbooks about how to solve a problem, but also ensuring that our technical climate resources actually acknowledge and share out indigenous knowledges and practices as well that can further resolve and solve issues within this region. And further, as I talked about a little bit earlier, we have flagged actions for further environmental justice review at their implementation stage. And we talked a bit about this in our Community Development Committee earlier this week. But as we had reviewed the plan, we reviewed the entire plan for environmental justice impact, but there certainly are some actions that will require additional review when we get to that implementation stage, as well as additional engagement strategies and approaches to really ensure that we are taking that environmental justice lens to its fullest. On this next section, this falls under our accelerating emissions reductions from council operations and is really focused on developing these division-specific inventories of energy efficiency and building systems electrification opportunities, really sharing across all of our facilities what we learn and some to be able to apply to all of our facilities management. It's sort of that low-hanging fruit that we've done really well in some of our facilities, but haven't necessarily applied that across the board. So just another opportunity to share across, get some dollar savings and energy efficiency improvements within our building management and asset management. On this next priority, and I promise I just have a short number of actions left to go through, but these are listed as higher impact and a little bit higher difficulty. Not quite as simple as changing out some light bulbs or moving some things through, but really identifying opportunities and being ready for and pursuing state and federal funding opportunities when they present themselves. And we see them right at our doorstep today. But this is certainly something we've heard from our partners, agencies, and local governments as well about excitement really around the opportunity to partner with us to pursue some of those opportunities. So we really wanted to be clear clear that this was an action that the council was committed to, that this was important to us in our working and furthering climate action across the region as well as within our own operations. And to some of the points that Councilmember Lindstrom was speaking to earlier, emergency preparedness planning is incredibly important. It's something that we do as a regular part of all of our work and our continuity of operations planning as well. But we really want to expand that further to incorporate our anticipated climate change impacts. As many of you know, we have completed our climate vulnerability assessment already several years ago and are now looking to integrate all of that knowledge that we've done in our research side into our operations as well. And then finally, this section is really about how we, as a cross-divisional team, continue to implement this work. So we, I don't know if these are necessarily actions, but more probably on our implementation plan of things that we know we need to do. One of that is chartering the interdivisional implementation team as well as divisional teams to ensure that this work is getting done, that we're doing it in a coordinated fashion, and that we also are developing the evaluation and metrics that need to get done and done consistently across the agency so we can report those back to you all on what we're actually able to accomplish. We also see a need for additional staff workforce development internally to ensure that even for folks who don't realize they might be doing climate work, that they are. And also building up the vocabulary and understanding as well as learning from our own staff who have a significant amount of expertise and kind of train the trainer, if you will, to help further our climate work across the council. And finally, we do a ton of reporting to a number of agencies, the state and others, internationally as well on our energy use, and there's just such an easy opportunity for us to just do that better with less duplication and to really create a consistent approach across the council's divisions who are doing that reporting to do that more effectively. So I just zipped through a whole bunch of actions. I have a whole bunch of questions, and I know we don't have a whole bunch of time. So I would just leave it with you if there are any other questions you might have, and I'm certainly happy to take any feedback offline as well.
Great, are there any quick questions? Go ahead, Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just appreciate, and I think we've talked about this at Transportation Committee too, the really focus on environmental justice and how we talk about it. I don't think we've really developed kind of what our framework is to apply that. And I look especially at transportation and transit projects, and that's certainly a big part of the lens that we need to be talking about those projects, because some of the projects that we're doing can have huge environmental pluses and minuses. And so having that framework and sort of those tools to talk about it, I think is just going to be very, very beneficial for all of us. So thank you for keeping that part of the conversation going.
And I would just circle back to what I said at CDC. I think this is gonna be illustrative too, and I think I kind of referred to it when we were getting our budget, for next year. But, okay, so I wanna see public safety as an example within the budget show up. I wanna see this work in the budget show up. And, it is fair to make the call and, well, if it's not, cost effective, maybe we shouldn't make the expenditure, but to your point, Councilmember Lindstrom, not doing something is doing something. So, if there, and I know it's hard to, you're building this ship as you're kind of setting it to sail, but there's a way to carve out some things in the budget to show us, what the savings are, what the impacts are. We're chasing climate change, right? But, whatever we can do there is an impact. And so, if there's a way to just show us some of that, that'd be, I think, helpful for this group as well.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you for your work. Really appreciate it. And where's your next stop? Did you get to all the committees?
This is our last one.
And then council of the whole, is that where it's going?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Next Wednesday, so see you
Yes.
again.
Okay, well, great, thank you for that. All right, I don't know if we are, we're not gonna be televising this next portion.
Nope.
So, Councilmember Barber?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I move that this meeting be closed to the public pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13B.05, Subdivision 3B, and applicable case law, so this committee can discuss with our legal counsel in a confidential setting attorney-client privilege matters.
Thank you, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Lee. And I'll just add, a public body by majority vote in a public meeting may decide to hold a closed meeting under section 13D.05 subdivision 3B of the Minnesota Open Meeting Law to discuss attorney-client privilege matters. Discussing these litigation matters in a confidential setting will permit the council to engage in a candid discussion and resolve these matters in a way that benefits the council and the public. Discussions during the closed portion of this meeting to discuss attorney-client matters will be confined to the pending litigation matters listed in the committee agenda. So with that, we have a motion then to close the meeting. It's been seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And that, those opposed no. That passes. And again, thank you. Before we do close the meeting,